I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce our clinician for tonight, Ken Ehlers from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Ken has been modeling Colorado narrow gauge since 1977, first in HON3 and then in SN3. Ken is well known for his contest modeling, having twice won Best of Show awards at the National Narrow Gauge Convention in 1990 and again in 2000. Ken's layouts have been featured in the Gazette, SN3 Modeler, RMC, Model Railroader, and he is MMR 119.
Well, tonight's presentation is the first part of two parts where I'm going to talk about digital model railroad photography. We're going to focus on the things that you can do in digital that you never could be able to do in film photography, and particularly on how to photograph your layouts and models. The first really important thing I need to tell you is that I am absolutely not a professional photographer. I retain my amateur status completely. So all the techniques and everything I show you are going to be things that you guys can do just as well as I can. And so with that, we'll get started. I've taken all the photographs in the clinic, but there's a number of models and layouts that come from different places. And I've tried to notate whose work that is. The layout pictures that have photo backdrop, that's my present layout. Those pictures that have a painted backdrop, that's my old layout from Lake Jackson, Texas. What we're going to be doing tonight is talking about camera technique and photo composition, the things that you actually do working with the camera. Next month, we're going to talk about software, Hilton Focus, and Adobe Photoshop. Both parts are absolutely necessary to take the kind of photos I'm taking. So the most important thing is, now if we had everybody live here in front of me, I would entertain all sorts of kind of silly comments, like the most important thing is the lighting or the focus or the composition or the artistry of the photographing. When all of us know as narrow gaugers, absolutely the most important part of the photo is the modeling. The reason we take pictures of our models is to be able to share them. We take them to contest and show the pictures off. We send the pictures into Bob Brown with our articles. And I was thinking about this today. If model railroading lasts another 20 years, there'll be guys sitting around looking at our pictures in magazines that are 20, 30 years old. So they will either say, boy, the photography's really come a long ways. These guys didn't know much. Or they'll look at our pictures and say, wow, that was really neat stuff back then. And I'm hoping that's what they say. So I want to say several things about our modeling first. The techniques I'm going to show are going to allow us to get the whole picture into focus, the front and the back. So there's no reason not to add all sorts of detail, grass and weeds and rocks and whatever you can do to add color and texture to the front and the back of the photos. Adding a backdrop is going to really improve the photograph. If you just take a picture and you're looking at all sorts of clutter in the background, your eye is going to go to the clutter and you won't ever see the models in front of it. So even a very simple blue sky background with a few clouds are going to draw the attention back to the models much better. The other thing I can suggest is some simple weathering. And here I'm not talking about some of the extreme weathering that we like to do as narrow gaugers, but the kind of weathering that draws all of our models together into a scene and makes them look like they go together. And finally, the other thing I would say, especially about the modeling, is after you've taken a few pictures, look carefully at what's in the picture. That orange pickup truck that you bought for $1 at a swap meet, and you've gotten used to seeing it there in your scene, it really looks out of place. Everybody else that looks at your photo will go, what is that doing there? So after you've taken a few pictures of the scene, go back and be really critical about pulling things out that don't belong or aren't things that maybe aren't quite up to your standard of what you want to see in your photograph. Okay, so let's get started. First thing we want to do is talk a little bit about equipment. You need a real camera. 12 megs is kind of out of date. My first digital camera was 6 megs. The one I'm using now is 24. Mark was telling me about one he just purchased that's up to 40 megs. So they just keep growing. The thing to remember, when you go from 6 megs to 24, that means that you can photograph an area that's twice as high and twice as wide. You also need a sturdy tripod. It needs to be, it needs to go up high enough that you can take pictures up on your upper level without having to stick the tripod on a stack of bricks or boxes and have it wiggling around. Need a memory card. 16 gigs is way out of date. I think the smallest ones you can buy now are about 128. And that's good because these large file sizes really add up. And the other thing I would really suggest you have is an extra battery or two. And this is really important when you go other places to photograph your friends' layouts. Your battery will die right in the middle of your session if you don't have a spare. So what is a real camera? Well, first of all, it needs to be able to be mounted on a tripod. Secondly, you need to be able to control all the functions that camera can do to be able to work in manual mode. And this means to both the camera and the lens should be able to be set in manual. You also need to be able to get the output out of the camera in RAW. All digital cameras take their photos in RAW, but most of them only allow you to get JPEG outputs. You need the RAW output to get the full output of megapixels. When you take a JPEG out of your camera, you're throwing about 1/3 of the megapixels away before you can get started. So here's what you're paying for when you buy a digital camera. First of all, the sensor, the number of megapixels, the camera's computer and ability and flexibility to be able to set it up for different kinds of lighting, different ways of taking pictures. And probably the single most important thing about buying a good camera is you're paying money for the quality of the lens, the way that the glass is ground and polished. And those are the big differences between having a good camera and using your iPhone, which is a great way to take pictures when you're doing layout tours, but it just doesn't provide you quite with the flexibility that you would like to have to take really, really great shots. You're also going to need a program that allows you to download your photos from your camera to the computer. You will need a program to convert the RAW files to TIFF after you've loaded them on your computer. In the old days, when your computer had a disk reader, the camera would come with the software. These days, you're going to have to go out on the internet and download the files, and they are specific to the camera manufacturer and sometimes to the specific camera you have. RAW is a generic term. For instance, in Nikon, the files are called .NEF, and you need the specific software to convert those. Okay, let's talk about how to set the camera up. This is going to be a bit of a shock for you guys that have had a camera for 10 years and never got it off the auto mode. The first thing we want to do is set the camera for the largest file size that it will put out, and invariably that's going to be in the RAW format. Next thing we want to do, these are all in your menu settings. You may have to. I usually just start at the top and scroll through everything to make sure I don't forget something. Second thing you want to do is set your lighting to incandescent. We're going to be using 3200 degree Kelvin photo floods. If you the light and the setting on your camera need to match to get the best light setting. Next thing is to set your camera for the lowest ISA. In the old film days, a low ISA meant you had a very fine-grained film, and you're going to get very fine detail. On a digital camera, it doesn't mean that at all. What it means is that on a low setting, you're going to get less electronic noise out of your sensor. To some degree, this is going to depend on the quality of the sensor that was built into the camera. But in general, you'll get a little bit cleaner pictures if you turn the ISA all the way down. And finally, we want to set our timer so that when you push the button to take the picture, the camera doesn't jiggle for several seconds and your photograph becomes blurry. The even better way to do that besides a timer is to use a remote infrared device. This allows you to back away from the camera so you're not kicking the tripod. And sometimes my lights are set up in such a way that it helps to back up several feet from the camera, and so I'm not blocking the light with my body. But it's important not just to push the button and let the camera jiggle. Okay, as I said, the lights we're using are going to be 3200 degree Kelvin photo floods. That means that the tungsten inside the light is actually burning at 3200 degrees Kelvin. I mount these in cheap Walmart clamp-on fixtures. The first ones I bought a number of years ago, I think were like $5 or $6 a piece. They're up to about 20 bucks now, but it's a cheap and easy way to mount these photo floods. This is what a typical light scene setup looks like. I always use at least 2 lights. The main light is that light that's coming directly in at the scene that represents the sun, of course. That is the light that you will spend the most time moving around, finding the best place for the position of that light. That's the light that will make the difference on how the scene looks in the photograph, the way the shadows look, the way the light bounces off the model. The other lights are fill lights, and I generally use anywhere from 1 to 3 of these, and I bounce them off the ceiling. The ceiling in my training room is a fairly luminous white color, so the light bounces off really well. Back a number of years ago, I used a lighting umbrella, and the umbrella did a great job of doing 2 things, and that was primarily tearing up structures and destroying trees. So I don't do that anymore. The ceiling works just about as well. Something that you'll see a number of photographers use is a second fill light that comes directly in at the model. If you do that, that particular light needs to be at least twice as far away as your main light, or you'll get a second set of shadows. And if you do that, you need to check carefully that you're not getting a second set of shadows. Also, when you set up your main light, you want to check that you're not getting shadows on your backdrop. Both of those situations make the photograph look a little strange. And notice my professional setup here as far as how I've got my lights in the room. These are just simple 1x2s. I've been photographing a number of layouts in town, and there are always places to clamp the 1x2s, and they're easy to move around. And the other thing to notice there, these bulbs get really, really hot. So before you move these things around, you want to let them cool off a bit. You can use exactly the same techniques for modeling individual models. Here again, I've used a single main light and a fill light that's bouncing off the ceiling. What we're trying to do here is get a little bit of shadow so that it brings out the detail, and the detail just pops out at you. But we're not trying to get such a contrast that we get really dark places or really light places. That means you're going to have to experiment and move your main light around just a bit here and there. But you'll notice on all three of these photos that you can tell instantly where the light's coming from. And the other thing that stands out using the photo floods, you're getting really good color. These are exactly the way these models would look like if you took them outside and looked at them under sunlight. A couple of weeks ago, when we had the clinic on the room lighting, we talked about the CRI, or color rendering index. This is an indication of how good the color is going to be. Sunlight gets a perfect score of 100. The photo floods also get a perfect score of 100. So you're going to get good color out of the photo floods, and you also get the advantage of having some directionality to it and being able to get the shadows, which makes the detail pop. Now, if you insist on photographing under fluorescence, the color rendering index there ranges from 70 up to about 92. The cheap shop lights that you're going to buy at Home Depot, those are going to be somewhere around 70, 75. So your red caboose that looks beautiful when you look at it outside is when you bring it inside under the fluorescence, it's going to have kind of a brownish or grayish, or pinkish or yellowish color to it. It's going to look funny compared to what the color that you would see under the photo floods or under the sunlight. And to the same degree, LEDs are going to do that, but probably not quite as bad. The CRIs on those are going to range from about 75 or 80 up to about 98. But again, the cheap ones you buy at Home Depot are probably going to be in the 85 to 90 range. Okay, I've had all sorts of people that always tell me when they're doing scenery or taking photographs or whatever it is, they say, I'm just not artistic. I can't do anything that's artistic. And my response to that is that's just silly. So I'm going to give you 3 rules for photo composition, which makes the whole thing of setting up your photograph really easy. The first one is bring the camera in close. The first picture up here on the left is your typical model railroad shot. We're back 5 or 6 feet with the camera. We see a rather large scene, but we see no detail on the models at all. And if we see that in the magazine, we're going to wonder, well, what do those really look like if I could see them? Second shot's a little better. We've moved in. We're about 3, maybe 4 feet away. You'd see a little bit of detail. But finally, on the third picture over here, I've made the lighting a little bit more dramatic, a little more contrast. And we're about 1.5 feet away from the locomotive. Now you can see the details in my scratch-built coal tower, which I want you to see. You can see the details in my Railmaster locomotive that I spent a year building. Neither one of those models are perfect, but I really want you to see the detail, and I want you to see what it looks like. And the only way you can do that is bring the camera in close. So that's rule 1, bring the camera in close. Rule 2, bring the camera down low. No helicopter shots. Again, photo on the left is your typical model railroad shot. Your eye doesn't really know where to go. It just kind of wanders back and forth. We can see a lot of stuff, but we don't know where to look. The second shot, I brought the camera down, we're a little closer. It's much more intimate. Our eye tends to want to start at the beginning and just move back. When I took this shot, I as well as taking the one on the left, I took about another 5 or 6 shots with the camera at various heights. And this was kind of my compromise. A more prototypical view would have been with the camera down a bit lower, but I had this idea that I wanted to see a little bit more of the modeling. So again, rule number 2, bring the camera down low. Rule number 3, use the rule of thirds. This is really easy. You take your prospective scene and divide it into thirds. Draw 2 vertical lines, 2 horizontal lines in thirds on the picture. Where they cross, you'll have 4 points. Pick one of those points and make it the focal point of your picture. The second thing you do as you're picking out your focal point, bring the camera in at an angle. Try not to put your locomotive or your structure smack dab in the middle of the picture where the camera is looking straight on. Think about how you walked around Shama for the last week, photographing locomotives out there. You were just kind of walking around, snapping shots as quick as you could. And as you walked up to something, you saw something interesting, you took a picture. 99% of the times when that happened, you were going to be at an angle and you would instinctively create a scene like this where your main subject was slightly off in the corner. So rule number 3, use the rule of thirds. Okay, and I've got a bonus rule. The bonus rule works really great. It's simply this: take lots of pictures. If you're a novice, and we all are at some point, 95% of the pictures you take are going to be terrible. That means that 5% of the pictures you take are going to be pretty good. And out of that 5%, if you take a bunch of pictures, one of them is going to be really great. So take lots of pictures, lots and lots. Okay, believe it or not, we're almost to the end of this first part. First thing I want to do before we talk about this slide is jump ahead to slide. We're going to be talking about a software program called Helicon Focus. This is available from the internet. It's about $100, $110, something like that. And when you download it and make the payment, they will give you a logon key, and you want to keep that forever. If you change computers, you can use the same program, and periodically, once every few years, they will do an update. I've had this same Helicon Focus software for about 14 or 15 years, and I paid for it once. It's kind of interesting to go out on the site. I think the way this started was that there was a group of Russians that were taking pictures using microscopes. Microscope has even a worse problem than model railroading does with depth of field. And they came up with this way of taking multiple shots where you vary the focus from picture to picture. And then you take all those photos, a set of 4 to 10 photos, and put them into Helicon Focus, and Helicon Focus combines those pictures into a single photograph in which everything is completely in focus. So that's kind of the starting point. So let's go back to that previous slide. So I've got 2 scenarios here. One for using Helicon Focus in a second. And the first scenario, if you don't have Helicon Focus yet, we're just going to take one photograph, and we want to do this and get the best focus we can get. So we have set up our lights. We have set the camera up. We have fiddled around with our photo composition, and we've moved the lights around, and we're really happy with what we've got in front of us. Now we just need to take the picture. So If I'm taking a single picture, the first thing I want to do is the big knob on top has auto and portrait and scenery and all sorts of different ways of taking picture. I want to set that on the aperture mode. There'll be a big A, aperture. What that does, that allows you to select your f-stop, and then it will automatically set your light exposure for you. So your f-stop should be the largest f-stop number that is available on your lens. This is kind of like wire sizes. The bigger the number, the smaller the hole in the lens. The smaller the hole, the better the depth of field. So there are some lenses that when you set the f-stop for the highest number, it will stay there regardless of where you set it on the telephoto setting. The lens I'm using, as you move from wide angle to telephoto, the f-stop will change. Be that as it may, you want the largest f-stop, particularly when you're only shooting a single shot. So set the f-stop, let the aperture set the exposure, and at this point, I would probably take a test photo and double check my LED and just make sure I hadn't done something really stupid. The picture that comes up on your LED screen needs to be pretty good color and not washed out or too dark, just to check that your light exposure is good. Then to set the focus, I set my lens in manual mode, and I manually focus 1/3 into the scene. As an example, let's suppose that the layout you're photographing is 3 feet deep, and your camera is set up 2 feet away from the fascia. So 1/3 into 3 feet would be 1 foot, and the camera is 2 feet away from that, so that would be 3 feet. Take the exposure ring, set it at 3 feet, and take your picture. If you have to, you can look through the you can look through the camera and double check yourself. But generally speaking, shooting 1/3 into the scene is going to make the best use of your depth of field. If you focus right at the front of your scene, you're going to lose 1/3 of your depth of field. If you focus at the very back of the scene, you're going to lose 2/3. Now, when you focus this way, 1/3 in, the front of the picture and the back of the picture are both going to be a little fuzzy. If you look at the top picture here on this slide, this was taken with one main light, no fill light, and you can see that the lighting is rather poor. There's some dark and light places, way too much contrast. You can also see that both the front and the back of the picture are quite a bit out of focus, very fuzzy. The bottom picture, on the other hand, was taken using helical focus. We've got the camera set up on the tripod. The first picture I take, I turn my focus ring counterclockwise as far as it will go, and I take a picture. I take that focus ring, turn it about 1/4 of a turn, take a second picture. And I keep doing that until I run out. And I've gone all the way clockwise, and I've gone all the way from the very furthest I can take a picture to the very closest I can take a picture. I probably have 4 to 5 shots now that I've taken. In this particular picture, on Craig Raymond's layout, you can see at the very front is pretty much in focus. The weeds, especially on the right side, you can see all the individual little strands of hair. The back of the picture, the rock work, you can see all the detail that pops out from the rock modes. It's really amazing to be able to see all this detail. Part of that is because of the helical focus and getting everything in focus. Part of that is from the photo floods and getting your main light into position. And the first time you do this, you will be amazed at how much detail you have on your layout you've never seen before. So I think that's probably a good stopping place for this point. When we go on next month, we will start with the next slide and talk a little bit about Helicon Focus. Helicon Focus is really a very, very easy program to use. There's almost nothing you have to learn that's difficult at all. And then we'll go on to the Adobe Photoshop. And this is where I will lose some of you guys because you think you have to be computer nerds. Helicon Focus is a big program. It has lots of stuff in it. But fortunately for us beginners, there's only a few little parts of it that we have to get familiar with. So if you want a little homework between now and October, take a look at Photoshop and just kind of scan around a little bit and see what it looks like. My intention with these two clinics is not to make everybody great photographers, is to get you interested in the idea that you can take great pictures of your remodeling. And I've got some really neat shots of some other people's modeling coming up next month. And it just amazes me that in a good photograph, their models can look almost as good in the picture as it does when you're standing there looking at it. So with that, I think we'll go to questions. There are some.
Ken, there's two questions. One, Dave Adam asked if you have any experience with using the new LED light panels that are made for photography.
No, I don't. I was in a camera shop the other day picking up a photograph that I'd had printed, and they didn't have any photo floods, so I'm going to have to order those online. But they tried to sell me one of those. It would probably work pretty good. Again, the LEDs are not going to have quite as good a color rendering index, although I would think these would be pretty close. The thing you want to do is not mix and match your lights. Back on that slide where I showed you the light setup with the two fixtures, what you should have noticed in that picture also is that all of the room fluorescents were turned off. You don't want to mix different colors of lights because all that's going to do is muddy things up. So if you use the LEDs, you'll want to use those exclusively.
Very good. Next question: is Photoshop Elements okay for this work?
Yes, and in fact, it's quite a good program. And if you're just getting into doing this, it's probably better because you're not going to have to wade through so many things. I think it's going to have almost everything that we're going to talk about next time. And I think you can still buy it directly. It's around $100 or so. My experience with it goes back about 15 years ago. We bought a scanner, a $70 scanner, and it came with a free copy of the photo elements. But I don't use it anymore because that copy was a Windows copy, and I'm on a Mac now. Plus, I've gotten really used to playing with all the different things that Photoshop does. But photo elements should work very well.
Next question. Can you describe the camera, the brand, and the model number that you're using?
It is a Nikon D3200. It's 24 megs. It's what is considered a 3/4 size sensor. All of your through the lens reflex digital cameras that run in the range from say $400 to $800 are going to be probably 3/4 size sensor. What that means, a full size sensor is approximately the size of 35 millimeter film from the film days. And the full size sensor is going to give you a little sharper picture. They're generally going to be a little bit bigger sensor, have more megapixels, but they're also going to be in much more expensive cameras.
All right, two more quick questions. Have you ever used speed lights with fill flash?
No. The problem with any kind of a flash system is that the only way you can tell what you're doing is to take a picture and look at the picture. The nice thing about the photo flash is you can actually see what you're doing without looking in the camera. In fact, a lot of times I will begin by setting up the lights and do that first before I even move the camera in anywhere close to where I'm going to take the picture.
Next question, what focal length zoom lens or what focal length lens do you prefer using for your subjects?
Great question. I am using a zoom. One of the questions I sometimes ask is, should you use a set focal length? Well, typically the set focal length will give you a little bit better picture, but having the flexibility of using a zoom is much easier. Mine is 18 to 50. 18 is about the same as what you would get with an old 35 millimeter film camera that was 33. So the numbers, and again, we're talking about a sensor that's 3/4 size. The numbers are going to be somewhat smaller than what you're used to if you're still thinking in film. But 18 to 50 covers the range of everything I'm shooting.
And then a comment here at the very end says, don't get incandescent lamps too close to vinyl coated fiberglass lay-in panels for suspended ceilings. It will melt the vinyl.
They also melt your fingers.
Yeah, they're very hot. Okay. All right, Ken, well, thank you for your presentation this evening. We look forward to the next month's edition where you talk about post-processing with Photoshop. And if you can stop sharing, then we'll move on with our program.